Tropes are everywhere in fiction, and when looking at the most popular ones, a meaner character getting nicer as the story goes on has got to be one of the most used. From an ice queen being thawed, a villain switching sides, to a gradual character progression, these tales are often both satisfying and engaging the whole way through. Battle for Dream Island has had quite a few characters that have gone through or inverted the trope, but on the men's side, none are as iconic as what happened with Snowball. He went from arguably the least popular dude in Season 1 to being generally well liked, with many people thinking he could go the distance in TPOT. Those dreams quickly came crashing down with his elimination in the most recent episode though, despite having a season full of great moments, and a lot of fans who were now shocked by his exit. Was he just dealt a bad hand? Did he fail to reach his true potential? Or was there a deeper cause behind his sudden departure? To answer those questions, let's take a look at the journey Snowball has had until now to understand his development and downfall. From his rough start, his BFB slump, to his climb and cliff, this is the rise and fall of Snowball. Before I start, I should mention that, unlike with my TV analysis, a deep dive into each episode Snowball's in isn't necessary for a couple of reasons. One, because his role is very consistent within each season, making heavy explaining unneeded, and two, for Season 1 specifically, trying to find deeper subtext in a season made by preteens makes no goddamn sense. To expand on that a bit, while Snowball definitely has some depth in future seasons, base BFDI Snowball is not a deep character. From the very first episode, Snowball is established as a brute that's kinda one of the bros, but not really in the main trio. He thinks he's the best, has beef with a lot of the cast, and while he's not the brightest light, he's surprisingly decent at challenges. From winning tiebreakers to carrying his trio in episode 6, Snowball went a real long while not being put up for elimination after he survived the very first vote of the series. This was plainly intentional, as having a character like him to make comedy and conflict is both easy to write and makes the show more interesting, but his favoritism had drawbacks, and it ultimately boosted his unpopularity. Even beyond his personality that already didn't appeal to a lot of people, his favoritism went too far between episodes 9 and 10. You see, in episode 9, Snowball is entirely the reason his team loses the six-legged race and gets the most votes by a landslide. Normally he'd be cooked, scorched, booted out of the game, but with episode 9 introducing new teams, a twist was added to the vote. Whoever got the most votes wouldn't be eliminated, and instead, the winning team of last episode would pick which of the bottom two they wanted on their team, with the unpicked person being eliminated. It's kinda hard to grasp, but what matters is that Teardrop was in the bottom two, despite only having 5 votes to Snowball's 18, and she was also the one eliminated thanks to this voting twist. From a writing perspective, keeping a conflict starter over the gal who doesn't talk makes sense, but in the viewer's eyes, it just looks like Snowball has crazy plot armor, meaning that next time he'd be up for voting, it'd be on site. His team didn't lose in episodes 10 or 11, but as soon as he was up for elimination in the merge episode, he was doomed even against Rocky and Tennis Ball, who were both bottom 2 survivors. Bubble got 4 votes, Rocky got 11, Tennis Ball got 18, and with 47 votes, Snowball was eliminated midway through the season. That's basically the end of his role in base BFDI, but I should mention one more thing before we move on. Episode 20 introduced a rejoin vote where all the eliminated characters were eligible to come back at the final 5. You'd think a mean character would have more of a chance, considering Blocky rejoined earlier this season and Flower literally rejoins this episode, but...
Snowball?
Yeah?
You got 8 votes. They were the only ones, the oddballs in a group of normal voters.
Is that enough to win?
No, it is not.
Yeah, Snowball got the least votes. His pitch probably didn't do him any favors, but even so, every other character did better than him, which all but cemented him as the least favorite when this episode came out. Things weren't looking good, but maybe more people would come around on him when the season ended? Well, in the vote to join BFDI, Snowball did a bit better than the rejoin vote, but it still wasn't enough. He received 143 votes, making him 37th overall, yet still the least voted out of the original cast by a good margin. Since he didn't join, he was flung to the TLC/LOL like most of the cast and didn't do anything else for the rest of BFDIA pre-hiatus. I could mention what Snowball does post-hiatus, as he does have some lines and prevalence with the LOLers, but when talking about his rise and fall in order, jumping to the future and release order doesn't make too much sense, nor does it really add to the story. What does matter is that Snowball was stuck with not having many fans and not having the opportunity to gain fans thanks to not joining BFDIA. The future was grim, but BFB served as a beacon that allowed every character the potential to shine. This could have been the chance for Snowball to turn things around, but the reality was that this was the start of a slump for him. Now, regardless of how I feel about Snowball's utilization this season, I do think there's some material that lays the groundwork for him to start gaining some traction, even from the very first episode. After only throwing seeds in the introduction, Snowball starts out on the right foot in the team-forming part of the episode when he rejects the invite for an all-ball team to try to form his own Harlem Globetrotters. Pi doesn't meet his standards, so he starts with the Lightning for his high kill count, flight, and DPS potential. Since Lightning realizes that Snowball is looking for aggression, he suggests Fanny join because even without having arms, she has the hateful grit needed for their success. His third pick is actually no one, because Flower loops his dream team with the fractured alliance of Pencil, Match, Ruby, and Bubble together to make her dream team. He isn't happy about this, but the team is already locked in, and thus Iance is born. Right off the bat, Snowball continuing his want to be a leader, and then ending up on a team with lots of potential leaders gives him a lot of early tempo. These dynamics could have definitely led to Snowball being a major player on the team if it weren't for two things. The first is obviously the massive cast of the season, but the second is central to what the main plotline of the team becomes after this episode. You see, during the challenge, all Iance does is jump like idiots and lose the challenge even with the aforementioned flyer on the team. This means that right out the gate, Snowball is already on the chopping block and a team shakeup is already going to happen. At a glance, this elimination might seem treacherous, but when looking at the full breakdown, you could see that it really wasn't. Bubble, Ruby, Lightning, Snowball, and Flower are all under 1,000 votes to eliminate. It's very clear that the hater energy of Fanny and the queen bee-ness of Match and Pencil made them larger targets, and it's even more clear that the voters wanted Pencil out with how she got double the amount of votes that the last safe Fanny got. What could have been a clash of leadership between Snowball and Pencil doesn't happen at all with her being eliminated, and instead, her exit starts the early stages of a conflict between Match and Bubble that becomes the main focus of the team. I guess not being too relevant made his risk of being eliminated go down, but considering that Iance doesn't lose till episode 11, Snowball ends up feeling underutilized for most of the season. Because of that fact, I can just breeze over a lot of the episodes that don't really matter, starting with 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Across these episodes, Snowball is either not relevant or primarily used for comedy, which isn't a bad role for him, but it doesn't really unveil more of his character. I guess defending Loser in episode 7 is a little interesting, but it feels more like a throwaway line and not anything substantial about his idea of respect that will become more prevalent later on. As for right now, we could finally take another pit stop with what he does in episode 8. Bubble is representing Iance in Jeopardy, but after she fumbles the first question, both Match and Snowball start getting on her case. This is basically where the plotline between Match and Bubble starts, so while Snowball isn't as notable as either of them this episode, he still wants to make sure everyone's pulling their weight and is relevant because of it. The challenge ends up getting close, but Iance is bailed out because Stapy rolls the worst cheating attempt ever and is asked by the voters to leave BFB. Continuing on, we see Snowball challenge Beast in episode 9, not do much in episode 10, and only complain about not getting picked over Flower to do the challenge in episode 11. He gets over it after he wrecks Fanny, but maybe he should have made a bigger deal of it, because despite her efforts, Flower chokes, and Iance is up for elimination for the second time. Now this vote shouldn't be too big of a deal. Sure, Bubble, Lightning, and Ruby are in no danger, and Fanny and Flower are safe too, and, wait a minute, Bottom too? Sure, he was a bit mean to Fanny, but compared to being 4th safe in BFB 1, this is quite the jump. I mean, I say that, but he only got a little over half the votes Match got, but it shows that even with a tad more intrigue compared to Season 1, voters were still not on his side, and his survival in both these eliminations were because his competition was hated more. Luckily for him though, Iance doesn't lose any more challenges for the rest of pre-split, but even so, there are still some interesting things to bring up. The two-parter of episodes 13 and 14 mark an interesting period for Snowball, because while he doesn't become the new team leader, Snowball does start to show more qualities of the one he'd soon become. With Match and Pencil gone, Ruby takes the Iron Throne of leader and gets her team to start digging for emeralds. She has some immediate friction with her peers though, namely Flower, Lightning, but mainly Snowball. Their dynamic feels a lot more memorable than you'd expect, with how her fun attitude clashes with his grit in a way we'll obviously see more of in TPOT. Speaking of which, not to be underwhelming, but there really isn't anything more to say about his BFB run since he dies in the lava flood and isn't recovered till it's time for the split in episode 16. He chooses to join TPOT, likely after seeing 4 struggle to eliminate Spongy, and officially ends his run in BFB. That concludes Snowball's role in BFB, and like many characters this season, he's okay. For being one of the original 20 contestants, and an active character in general, he can feel a bit underused on Iance with how the Free Smart drama prevented him from trying to take charge more often. Episodes 1, 8, 13, and 14 show a bit more of what he could have been this season had the split not happened, but in a vote to eliminate, he would always be against the ropes. Maybe he'd survive over Fanny or Flower, but considering how sharp his rise in votes was in the span of 10 episodes, he was probably doomed next. That thought gets way more certain when looking at the popularity poll from BFB 13, where he only got 212 votes. 51st overall, and while it's not like the other mean bro characters did super well either, he was still the least popular on Iance, and definitely needed to be more active to get out of his slump. Fortunately for him though, the start of TPOT gives Snowball exactly what he needs to upgrade his metaphorical dinghy into a speedboat. With that, it's time to talk about his rise. Like with BFB1, Snowball starts on the right foot again in the team picking stage, this time in terms of entertainment. He gets ditched by Lightning, nailed by Naily, and is literally the last pick when he joins Basketball, Belle, Eggy, Foldy, Grassy, and Robot Flower to make the strongest team on Earth. This is a totally fresh batch of characters for Snowball to work with, and unlike with Iance, there isn't as much sovereign or cross-season tension to worry about, so even with some clashing with Basketball, Snowball becomes the leader of the team. I might as well talk about everyone else who's relevant on the team too, since while Snowball is the team leader, it doesn't mean everyone else is just horsing around. Basketball and Robot Flower have the main plotline of the team once it fully begins in episode 7, and while Snowball isn't really involved in it, he still pushes his team forward enough to stand alongside them in terms of prominence. Belle and Grassy are generally doing things, especially with Snowball and Grassy's case, leaving Foldy and Eggy with the short end of the stick. Even this early on, you could see a tad of this structure in the challenge of episode 1 that they barely win, and a lot of it next episode. Basketball and Robot Flower go off on their own, Snowball, Belle, and Grassy do the block stacking challenge, and Eggy is feeling awkward while Foldy just hangs out. Things come to a head when Snowball gets incapacitated after Belle gets tangled, leaving Eggy and Basketball arguing, which makes an opening for Teardrop to cause their loss this episode. Now, even with Snowball doing more, it has only been 2 episodes, and in Vote to Eliminate, I doubt that'd be enough to get him out of the hot seat. Fortunately for him, Vote to Save was just the olive branch he needed to finally have a leg up on the race. Again, that may seem presumptuous considering how poorly he did in the BFB popularity poll, but a lot can change in 3 years, and Snowball was now ramping up. Just to look at how the elimination goes for him. Grassy is first safe with, frankly, an insane amount of votes for this early on, followed by Snowball with still quite a lot of votes, even if it is half of what Grassy got. Now, I have no proof of this, but this placement reminds me of how his former teammate Fanny did pretty alright in the first elimination of the season, despite her not getting anything too major yet. Both would be likely targets in Vote to Eliminate, so with the new format, fans took the chance to rally behind them. No matter the reason behind this traction, he got a good bit more votes than most of his team, and Foldy being eliminated doesn't impact him at all, so let's move on to the next few challenges where Snowball keeps revving up. In this very episode, he comes up with the idea to make a test of strength game for 2, and then in TPOT 4, he lights Grassy's assy on fire to barely give them the win in keeping the plant alive. Say, I've brought up Grassy a few times, so I should probably talk about his dynamic with Snowball, because they quickly become a duo. Their dynamic is kind of inconsistent in these early TPOT episodes, with how Snowball goes from complimenting him to punching him, but once it's fully developed, it feels like a slightly different take on the dynamic Snowball had with Ruby. Grassy is fun like Ruby, but could also be considered a cute character, which gives them more of a Sully and Boo, DK and Pauline, Kratos and Atreus, or Ely and Berserker kind of affinity. You know, the classics. Anyway, given how popular Grassy was, and still is, their status as a pair became both an asset and, inevitably, a big factor in Snowball's downfall. No time for foreshadowing though, as while episode 5 isn't too notable for Snowball, the strongest team on Earth does lose, meaning Snowball has another elimination to contend with. Not much to worry about though, as Snowball is second safe again, and Eggy being eliminated also doesn't really impact him. Hell, thanks to the challenge, nothing can impact him, since now he's Metal Mario after he eats a yoil berry to help his team swipe a bag-shaped ticket to victory from the hotel kitchen. His metallicness plays a role in the next 3 episodes, and of those 3, there are 2 notable things from Snowball in both how he feels about Grassy and how his characterization is developing. The first is from episode 7, where Belle comes up with a plan to use Snowball's steel body to make a roof covering. He doesn't want to do it, but gets overpowered by Grassy, who got strong after doing the strength game. In the moment, Snowball is just surprised and begrudgingly accepts his fate, but this right here is where Snowball starts to actually respect Grassy. It's a little dubious in the context of the episode, but his respect becomes very clear with what he does in episode 8. During the balance beam challenge, after Snowball knocks off Barf Bag, Teardrop is left vulnerable, but instead of pushing her off too, he hesitates. He then flat out defends her from Robot Flower after learning her loss would make her auto-eliminated, and then talks to Grassy about what to do next, where he says,
"Look, I want to get out the weaklings, but she's sick. That's different, right? Look, you helped me out, so I'm gonna let you decide, Grassy."
Now in a vacuum, this is a great show of progress for Snowball, but even when considering last episode, I think this scene feels a bit early. Not only do I not really buy him empathizing with Teardrop after she caused the strongest team on Earth to lose in TPOT 2, but he also only just started to respect Grassy, so actively seeking his opinion the way it happens in the episode feels like too big of a character shift. This is honestly one of the nicest things he does in the series, and it happening, again, literally one episode after he started to appreciate someone, makes the moment feel misguided. I think Grassy being more proactive and trying to stop Snowball and Robot Flower from pushing Teardrop off to convince Snowball to protect her would have worked much better, but either way, this scene shows that Snowball is clearly trying to soften. He even takes a back seat in leading, with him dying and getting rolled a Katamari'd in episode 9, leaving him only a pile of snow in episode 10, where Basketball and Belle take his usual role. They're up for elimination once again, and for the third time, Snowball is the second one safe, with Belle's elimination mattering a little since their dynamic was good, but not being too notable overall. With 25 players left in the game, we can get right into the next phase of teams and of Snowball's popularity. After being in no danger in the vote 3 times in a row, Snowball had now reached his contender status despite having so much competition and even on a team that could pose trouble for him. For being randomly jumbled by 1, the newly formed Team 2 is a bit of a bad omen with how it shares a lot of similarities to Iant's. On one side we have Book, Ice Cube, and Price Tag, who've had friendships and drama throughout the series, while on the side of Snowball, Grassy, and Eraser are bros or bro adjacent. There isn't a bridge like Flower this time, and due to their similar social circles or archetypes, the 3 in each group would clearly be vying for the votes of each other. This could be bad for Snowball, but he doesn't really need to worry about it right now, nor is a deep dive on these early team swap episodes really necessary. He simply retakes the role as chief of his team by doing well in challenges, while still being tight with Grassy, and that gives him the critical edge in Team 2's first elimination after their loss in TPOT 13. The first boot of the team ends up being Eraser, and, well, tragic IMO, this is a very good thing for Snowball. With how the team was divided, all the now homeless Eraser voters would be super likely to switch over to voting Snowball or Grassy, especially with how both TPOT 14 and 15 weren't very Team 2 centric. While that lack of attention was starting to make cracks in Snowball's position, that Eraser boon catapulted him all the way to first safe in TPOT 16. This right here is what I'd call his peak. Not peak like Peak Fiction or peak like Peak, but peak in how this is the most votes he received this season. It was looking good for him, especially after being solid once again in TPOT 16, but things can change in a blink of an eye, and for Snowball, an avalanche was steadily approaching. Looking at what Snowball does in TPOT 17, may not seem troubling at first, as he's representing his team on the Ferris wheel challenge with pen, golf ball, and marker. Him and Pen start by having some neat interactions, considering they haven't really talked since base BFDI. From there, they team with Marker to try to take out Golf Ball, but the London Eye gets loose, and they have to slow it down first. After it's slowed thanks to Pen making glue, Marker takes out Golf Ball and Snowball, before Marker judo throws Pen off the wheel to end the challenge. Team 2 overall gets 9 points, which isn't enough to save them from being up for elimination. You see, the concern of this vote doesn't really come from Snowball himself, but instead from the circumstances around him. In general, it feels like the Ferris wheel was the least focused on challenge. Pen was probably the highlight here, but his big moment with Pencil was after the challenge had already ended. As for the rest of his team, Book had a tense fight with Pencil, Price Tag was great in the eating contest, and despite Grassy dying midway through his challenge, his first safe crown being taken by Snowball in TPOT 16 meant that more fans were worried about his chances and wanted to keep him safe. The vote was looking like it'd come down to the duo, and while personally I thought Snowball would fall just short, either of them going wouldn't have been too surprising. No matter how anyone thought the vote would go though, the truth was revealed with the release of TPOT 19. Snowball only gets a piece of 2's power at the beginning, so let's just move into the elimination. Book and Price Tag were the obvious first 2 safe, leaving Grassy and Snowball in the bottom 2 for the first time this season. Both despair that one of them is guaranteed to go out, and with a 5,000 vote gap, Snowball is eliminated. He's upset to be gone, but he still gives Grassy a pep talk by telling him to stay strong before being sent to the elimination space. The last we see of him is trying to escape said elimination space, with a tint of green still being in his limbs. With that, we are now up to date on his journey, but before circling back to our main questions, I should bring up what the future could hold for him. Currently, Snowball's lasting role in the season is that of a support character to Grassy and his inevitable arc of becoming stronger. But unlike the uncertainty of his eliminated buddy TV, Snowball's direction is clear with how it will be important in the Upside Down plotline. Remember that green tint? It's important because thanks to Pencil, 1 now has all of 4's power, and almost all of 2's power, minus the last 17th that Snowball has. With this gleam of power, Snowball has been given a perfect runway to become the leader all the eliminated characters need to escape. Now I'm no prediction master, just look at the TV analysis for proof of that, but given how dire things are now, his power could become a key factor in leveling the playing field against 1. Alright, with that, we are now all caught up on his journey, which means it's time to tilt our perspective back into questioning his overall role in the show. Despite not being involved in a traditional character arc, Snowball has had plenty of great moments and has changed a lot compared to his early days in a way that feels mostly natural. He can be used for comedy, conflict, and his increased spotlight on the strongest team on Earth made him a key member of a really solid team that wouldn't have been the same without him. Remember, he was in the dregs during BFB, but now he's very well liked. Just take a look at the poll I did. 86% of voters felt positive about him, and personally, I agree with the majority on this one, as he is a fun character, but I should mention his flaws. My main critique of him would have to be that even with all Snowball does during TPOT, he still ends up feeling a little underutilized. His lack of direct focus is fine in the early stages of TPOT, but it becomes quite noticeable between episodes 13 to 16. There's a reason I darted past those episodes, because while he isn't bad in them, Snowball doesn't really evolve and just isn't as memorable on Team 2 versus how he was on the strongest team on Earth. I think giving him more interactions with the Book, Ice Cube, and Price Tag side of the team would have really helped him out, or maybe rekindling his relationship with Penn earlier would have given Snowball more to work with. As it stands now, he doesn't really get much with a racer since he's first off the team, so he mainly sticks with Grassy if he's not on his own. Now, the lack of focus might just be a Team 2 thing, as in general, Team 2 does feel like it's been given the least amount of content compared to every other clique, but either way, Team 2 ended up feeling like a stomp to Snowball's momentum. Being in a plateaued spot, combined with having a smaller team, not being involved in any major arcs, being in a less memorable part of TPOT 17, and voters thinking he was much safer than he actually was, is what led to his departure. Now, 17th, or 16th depending on how you look at it, place is still very good with how large the cast is, and his clean setup for more means that I doubt Snowball will be fading into the background again anytime soon, but that doesn't mean his elimination didn't sting a bit to fans who wanted him to go far. Overall, the situation that caused Snowball's downfall was one of positioning. Unlike someone like, say, TV, who was outclassed by his team, Snowball was put in a bad spot by the episode itself and the situations surrounding his teammates. Based on his trajectory, though, even if he survived over Grassy, I'm unsure if he would have the swing needed to go as far as some people expected from what he got on Team 2. That's what makes this show interesting, though, as if you told me someone like Bottle would last longer than Snowball around when the team swap happened, I don't think I'd believe it, but if you told me Snowball would one day be very popular at the start of BFB, I wouldn't believe that either. Uncertainty creates excitement, and though Snowball could be seen as unlucky by the end of his run, I'm fine with his elimination with how it benefits the show as a whole. Nevertheless, while he may have had some undertapped potential, I really like Snowball. He greatly benefits from his development, and while his run as a contestant may be over for now, I trust that between TPOT, or even IDFB, Snowball will keep on rolling. That's all I gotta say. If you haven't, please subscribe, like, share, hit that bell, comment if you have any thoughts, and thank you for watching.